So one question that some people ask is how do we know that things are going to work? Like there's been problems with MPW1 and MPW2. And so I wanted to do this short interview with Sylvain Minot, who helped out a lot with the infrastructure of Tiny Tapeout 1, and get some ideas about what we've done to counter these problems that we've seen in previous submissions. So just welcome Sylvain Minot, elite hacker.
Hi,
How you
Matt.
doing?
Good. Thank you.
Yeah. So you helped out a lot on Tiny Tapeout 1 because we'd had this idea. We put to make a what's like a JTAG scan chain. I mean, it's not JTAG, but basically putting all these designs into a long chain. And I had something that simulated. But then when you took a look at it, you thought, I'm not sure if this is going to work. Can you tell us a little bit about what your thoughts were?
Yeah. So the main issue was the design that was first in the repository is that it would essentially be subject to the exact same bug as there was in the IO configuration chain that basically hit MPW1 and MPW2. Is that even if inside the block, chances are things would have worked properly. In this case, simply because the block is sufficiently small that the timing constraint most likely would have fit. There is no analysis between the blocks, so it's a current limitation of the tool chain, at least as it was for MPW7. Is that you can't, if you design something that's end up being included as a macro in the top level design, you can't really analyze the timing between those blocks. And so what would happen is essentially, because each block regenerates both the clock and the data, depending on the timing relationship between those, both at the output of the block itself and whatever routing path the auto router decided to take, there might be a slight skew between them, and so you might end up with again a hold violation, which would have made it very hard to actually control what data end up at the input of the blocks. And so the way I solved that is the same way that they solved it in the IO scanchain now, is that you add additional register on the data output path, and you make that register clocked on the negative edge of the clock. And what that ends up doing for the next block is that your data valid window, the rising clock edge ends up being like smack in the middle of it, which is pretty much the ideal case, which means that not only you maximizes your chance of it actually working, and also that means that if you slow down the clock, you actually increase both your setup time and your hold time margin, which means that there will be a clock period at which it will work by design. Like even if there is like huge amount of skew or whatever, there will be a clock frequency at which it will work.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was the main thing. There was a couple of other details, but that's the main.
Yeah. So that was like solving timing problems in between the blocks. And then another thing that you did was you wrote some SDC timing constraints for the blocks themselves. So how does that help?
Yeah. So as I said, chances are it would have possibly worked at least at the typical timing, simply because the size of the block is so small that there isn't that much skew. But still, it's good to actually ensure that it gets validated and stuff like that. And so what I did is write, as you said, some timing constraint file, SDC file, which do two things. Is first, they try to tell the tools, okay, like the output timing, which is basically the timing relationship between the clock edge you generate at the chain output, and the relationship between the data, the time at which the data changes and the time at which the clock changes, is within some, given margin, and check that is actually the case. And kind of symmetrically at the input, okay, take like a worst case. Okay, we know we have this timing relationship at the output of the previous block. We don't know how much skew the routing will generate and things like that, but we kind of take like a conservative number, and we tell the tool, okay, at the input you can expect that kind of timing relationship. Will that meet the actual setup and hold time requirement of the flip-flop we end up registering that data into at our target frequency? And that basically tries to, basically maximizes against the terms that this is gonna work at our target frequency. But as I said, even if it didn't, we can just slow it down. And there is also like several layers of additional kind of fail-safe and backups and things in the scanchain controller itself to say, okay, if that ends up that we missed something, we can fall back a progressively degraded mode, even to the point, as you initially envisioned in the controller, is that there is even a fallback to like completely manually control the scanchain externally, so that we can generate basically any kind of timing relationship between the signals, and one of them will work by design.
Yeah. So that's like the next level of redundancy down that you just mentioned. We've got we've got the scan chain controller, which you also rewrote and made it 10 times faster than my naive version. I can't remember. It's like a big performance increase. And that can also generates like a divided down clock for people that need slow clocks, even slower clocks. And also we can kind of configure the pulse, the times between the pulses for like latching the data in and getting the data out to the next one, so that we can like experiment with these timings. And then if that doesn't work, then we've also can control it from the internal Caravel RISC-V controller, load some firmware, and then control it through the logic analyzer. And if that doesn't work, as you say, we also expose all the pins of the scan chain on the external pins of the chip itself. So then you could drive it with an FPGA or a microcontroller, and as you say, generate any kind of relationship between the signals that we want. And that's actually the default mode. So if we experience problems like we did with MPW 1 and 2 and we can't set up the IOs, the default mode for the IOs allows us to access all the designs inside.
Yeah.
So is there anything else that we should know about in terms of like why that should give us confidence in that this is going to work?
I mean, I think you pretty much mentioned everything. Like we try to anticipate failure both of our design and on the tools. Now, of course, we could have made like a gigantic mistake where the logic itself doesn't actually work, but it has been simulated. It has been simulated with kind of timings, and there was also, as far as I know, some formal proof done on the scan chain itself on your side. So yeah, I am very confident that at the very least the fallback to manual control will work, simply because the design is good. It's been proven in simulation stuff like that. If anything doesn't work in it, it's purely timing based, but we can pretty much control it externally entirely. So yeah, as long as the logic cells do what they do, which from MPW1 and MPW2 we know the actual logic works. Like there's some timing issues and stuff like that, but when we ask for AND, it actually does an AND, right? So we're fairly confident that this works. I'd be really, really surprised if we couldn't make it work.
Okay, well, thanks very much, Sylvain, for your time. Really appreciate it. And
thank you for having me.
Hopefully see you soon.
Yeah, see you soon.